So we talk about accessibility ROMs for wheelchair, screen readers for the blind, caption for the deaf. Those are essential. But there's something we don't say. A person who doesn't speak English is also excluded from English-only interfaces, and it's unusable. So I want to show you what is internationalization, and that internationalization is also accessibility. So what is it and how to do it properly? This is what I'm going to talk about in the next 30 minutes. So as it's been said, okay, it doesn't work. Do we have something? Oops. I broke the entire system. Sorry. It's this button and this button. Okay, thank you. So I am Guillaume Bernard. I am from the I-89 team, the internationalization team, and I am working in the team with Anders and Raphael, as you saw yesterday in the lightning talk of the team. That's my first talk at GUADEC, so even though I'm a long-time contributor, actually I started in 2013 as a simple translator in the French team. So my presentation will be divided in 5 different sections. First, I will talk about internationalization in general terms. Second, I review some of the most important rules for an internationalizable and localizable interface. Then I will focus a bit about Locale support and the complexity with the different languages. And then I will share you some of the things that we thought about for linguistic inclusion of users and also developers. And finally, I will talk about DemLines, which is our internationalization platform, and I'm the maintainer of this platform. So first thing first, what is what we call internationalization, or I-89? Internationalization is fundamentally about separating concerns in software development. At its heart, it means decoupling 3 distinct elements: the code logic, so the business rules, the features and the algorithms, the user experience, and so the user interface. So it's about layouts, components, and UI widgets, and also the text content, so the strings displayed to your users. This separation is what enables us and our software to reach users worldwide, not through miraculous translation, but through a deliberate technical and linguistic process and preparation. So we use I-89 and L10N, localization, and many people use these terms, but internationalization and localization, using these terms interchangeably, you shouldn't do that. Understanding the difference is essential. So internationalization is actually the engineering work. It's the infrastructure that enables your software to be displayed in other languages and to be shown to people with other cultures. So the question we ask is this technically capable of working in any language or region? And the other part, localization, is the cultural and linguistic work. It's the actual translation, not only translation, but also adaptation and testing in a specific language, region, or community. In localization, we ask, does this make sense and feel right for this audience? So it's 2 different problems. So why it matters for our community? Our internationalization efforts serve 4 interconnected goals. First, we focus on consistency across the entire ecosystem. When GNOME applications speak in a unified voice, localized in each language and adapted for each region to each people, users experience GNOME as a professional project, as a unified product. It serves also a broader global adoption. GNOME targets users everywhere, so a good internationalization and also a good localization remove barriers for speakers of languages with smaller tech markets, for example. non-Latin writing systems, and regions where accessibility is crucial. So this expands our user base a lot. And third, the perceived quality is also increased because when a user opens a GNOME application in their native language and find it perfectly localized and translated with the appropriate context, they perceive the entire ecosystem as professional and respectful. Conversely, broken translations and untranslated interface signal carelessness. And finally, we consider also accessibility as a human right. Internationalization and localization are forms of accessibility. We talk about making software accessible to people with visual impairments, hearing difficulties, motor challenges, and rightly so. But linguistic and cultural accessibility is just as important. A person who doesn't speak English is, as I said, excluded from English-only interfaces, just as a person who is blind is excluded from textual and visual-only content. So when we ensure GNOME speaks your language and understand your cultural context, we're saying you belong here, regardless of what language you speak and where you're from. This is the goal of localization and internationalization. Here we go. So let's switch to the second section. What are the rules and what are the rules for an inclusive and localizable interface? Now that we understand why internationalization matters, let's talk about how we actually do it. So first thing first, the foundation of good internationalization is good source writing. So American English is GNOME's source language, and the quality of English strings directly impacts. It directly impacts how translators understand what to translate, how well translations can adapt to other languages' grammar and syntax, and whether the interface feels natural or awkward to users. So the first principle, and it's also our golden rule, you should use simple, clear, and consistent language. Most translators are non-native English speakers. So ambiguous or complex sentences, message leads to mistranslations. It confuses users in every localized version. So you should also avoid slang and abbreviations. These are exceptionally hard to translate correctly. And also translators can't assume abbreviation will work the same way in other languages. You cannot assume that. For example, charset might be spelled out differently in French, Chinese, or Polish, for example. So you should be consistent and also use the same terminology and spelling everywhere. Choose one form and stick with it everywhere. You have the example with emails, and it's extracted from a real module I had to work on. So in this case, use just email, same syntax. Okay, the second rule is about formatting messages consistently. Maybe you know, maybe not, but white spaces and formatting matters enormously because for translation, we translate strings, including the white spaces. So whenever you decide to change a white space in your string, it creates a new string, a new message that has to be translated. So the key rules are: don't add trailing space or new lines, don't put white space before colons, question marks or exclamation marks, and also avoid the use of tabs inside messages because tabs won't align the same way in all languages. It depends on the size for example, the size of the tab sign on your system, and it might be longer or shorter. You should also avoid cultural references. Idioms, metaphor, region-specific conventions don't translate in other languages. They require cultural adaptation, which translators can't always do. The most known example is batteries included, which is a message that is displayed on the GNOME's website, and it clearly doesn't translate well in other languages. So try to find another formulation and to be a bit more explicit. You should try to avoid cultural references in your strings. I selected these examples from existing messages, not only from GNOME, but from other projects that require translation. And the fourth principle, you should never, ever concatenate strings. We often say that, the I8N teams, because building messages by concatenating fragments is one of the main issue we face with internationalization. In many languages, the word order differ fundamentally. And when you concatenate fragments, you just force the English word order. As an example, in English, it's subject, verb, object. In Japanese, subject, verb, object. In Japanese, subject, object, verb, and in Irish, verb, subject, object. So if you concatenate strings, you force the English word order, and it cannot be translated. Also, we lose context. So maybe the solution, well, no, it's not maybe. The solution is to provide complete string for each context. So this way, each string is complete, self-contained, and translatable as a whole. So don't forget, provide full strings. Next principle, handle plurals correctly. So plural handling is a common localization problem, and many developers try shortcuts that break in other languages. No worries, sometimes I do it myself. So there are many problems with the syntax you have above. It doesn't account for languages with irregular plurals like foot and feet, for example, or sheep, sheep. But also other languages have a way to represent plurals without an ending S. So it clearly doesn't work. Also, we have languages with different form of plurals. So in English, in French, and German, we have two forms of plural. But in Polish, Russian, or Czech, we have three forms of plural. And in Arabic, I found many complex rules, and I won't say more because I will probably say something wrong. But so the context changes, and there are many forms of plural. You can't account that there is only two. So maybe the solution would be maybe the solution would be to try a good if statement, but it still breaks the rule of there are in other language more than two plurals. So the correct approach is to use getText. It's a function from the getText software that you use, and you should use it even if you know the number will never be 1, because as I said, there are many different forms of plurals in other languages. So even if you know there will never be a 1 value, there can be 2, 3, 4, 5. You should use getText. I've got an example. In English, it's file and files. And in Polish, we have 3 forms of plurals and complex rules in the middle, because numbers ending with 2, 3, and 4, except 12, 13, and 14, have a certain form of plurals, and the other case have a third form of plural. So what are the techniques? Now we've covered how to write good source strings. Let's talk about some technical tools and practices to make strings translatable. So the getText library is the standard system for making and translating strings in C code. And so, understanding how to use it correctly is fundamental. So GNU getText has many compatible implementations in other languages like Python, Rust, etc. So first thing, you should use this macro, because this macro underscore parenthesis is used by getText. It's a tool to detect and to extract strings as messages to be translated. It works in many languages, so we use the same process for all the GNOME modules that we have on Demlize. Of course, there are messages you should not translate, like debug messages, variable names, and so on. Also, for dynamic content, you have to use format specifiers. So you should never hardcode values like digits, it's digit in my example, because we have to keep the connection for translators between the number and well, it's part of the context actually. So translators have to understand the context of the string. So if you write step blah blah out of blah blah, it gives information to the translator that the number of step could be unlimited. And also, if you maintain this kind of string, you have to make 2 changes in case your loop number changes. So you should always inject parameters this way. In other languages, like in Python, you can also name your parameters, which gives way better context to translators. Like in this example, I could say step number of total number of steps. And I guarantee you that it helps a lot. In my library, in my software, I have homonyms. I use same strings, but in different contexts. How to tell the translators that actually they are 2 different contexts. So the best example is how to translate open. In English, maybe it's always open, but in other languages, it's not always open, because open could be a noun or a verb in this example. So some English strings are ambiguous, and the meaning depends on the context, and it's something we have to be aware of. So you have to use pig_text, and pig_text, the first parameter is the context. So the best thing is to use a key, because this key you will reuse it. You will reuse it in the same context after. For example, this case of open is a case I encountered with Damelines, because with Damelines, I wanted to say that a merge request is open or closed, and there is another translation, there is another message for another thing with open, and it clearly doesn't translate the same way. And of course, with comments, if you don't know how to reduce the ambiguity, or if you want to add context to the translators, you have to use comments, please. About time. Okay, 20 minutes, okay. So I'll talk about Locale support. GNOME has 155 language teams. Obviously, not all of them are active, not all of them reach 100% translation. As an example, the French translation is not 100% complete, but we focus on GNOME versions and GNOME UI over GNOME documentation. This is our top priority. But supporting a locale means more than just translating strings. It means understanding and accommodating fundamentally different ways of writing, of formatting, and on organizing information. So when you write source code for and strings for GNOME, you're not writing just for English speakers, you're writing for the entire world. And also for languages with radically different properties. So we have plenty of writing systems. There are different alphabets, and this list is not obviously exhaustive. We have Latin, Cyrillic, Arabic, Indian, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and probably many others. So there is, in addition to this, different ways to read text. So from left to right, right to left, and in some rare cases, this could be bidirectional if it's in case a mix between LTL and RTL text. And of course, we have also letters that change shape. As an example, in Arabic, you have the letter that change shape based on the position in a word. So you have a sign for the isolated character. You have a sign for the initial, median, and ending character, which is different every time. Well, it's not different every time, but it's different based on the position. And you can see the translation of save document in different scripts. And so, what is it? So what's normal in a locale is wrong in another. But let's take an example. People speak French in parts of the world that are not France. They don't use euro, but I use euro because I live in France. We don't, or we may not, have the same cultural references. So how do we handle this? How do you handle this? By extracting all these contexts, all these numbers, date, currencies, and measurements from the strings, you help translating and localizing these systems. So for date formats, for example, the easiest thing is to use the frameworks we have. So you can actually render the date. You use an object that is a date, and you render the date in the localized version based on the system locale using the format specifier %x, for example. For numbers, there are different ways to write integers, as I showed on the right. In French, we use a space as a thousand separator, but in English, it's a comma. I think it's the same for decimal separator. It's a comma in French and a dot in English. So again, you can use this single quote indicates that it should use the adapted format in the system locale. And another subtlety with currencies, and as I said, there is different ways to write currencies. In French, you put the symbol at the end of the number. You have a space and the symbol. And in English, the symbol precedes the number. So you should always let the locale handle the position and the writing of your currencies. And this time it's not gettext, it's in the example standard C code. It's from standard library. It's strfmon, the function you can use. And again, for linguistic specificities, English has a minimal inflection. An inflection is a process of word formation in which a word is modified depending on its role in the sentence. So as an example, Russian has 6 cases, 6 grammatical cases and roles of each linguistic element, each changing word ending. You have always the same beginning of the word, and the word ending changes and varies. It varies depending on the context. So whatever the order of the words in the sentence, you keep the meaning because of these word endings. Because it's implicit that the from and the for in the English example are implicit actually. Okay, so I'll talk a bit about linguistic inclusion. I would like to focus on something I long thought about, which is not a rule or recommendation at the moment, but it is something I experimented with as a translator. These insights were discussed, were debated, and it is very clear that we as translators have received also a lot of concern about inclusivity of the language, both in original strings and in translations. So my example in this section will be exaggerated just in order to understand what I'm talking about. The main idea with this is that a lexical choice can exclude, can render invisible, and can embarrass a community or people. And so when we write software, our word choices signal who is welcome and who is rejected also. So maybe the most important thing in internationalization is you should never assume the gender when referring to people. The most common case is when you refer to user or administrators, because in all cases you should avoid pronouns like her, his, etc. Except, of course, if you explicitly know the gender of the person you are talking to. For example, in French, when you try to translate user, we say utilisateur ou utilisatrice, which is a user or user, because we say the masculine and the feminine form at once. So you can use collective or plural form instead. So using administration team, for instance, or system administration, when you use this form of sentence, we keep the language neutral in English and also in translation, because the gender is on the team or on the system, not on the people you are talking to. So with the same idea, try, if possible, to write your sentences a neutral way. So you should avoid languages, stereotypes, or or make assumptions on people. So try to avoid normal mode, but say instead standard, default. Well, you have, as I said, exaggerated examples. And also try, no, it's not try, but you should avoid discriminatory phrases. Many free, libre, open source software decided to exclude some of the terms because they refer to oppression and discrimination. So you should avoid them in any case, except for known exceptions, such as when you refer a term in another software and when you are referring to something that exists outside of your own software. Yes, and in this case, the word you use should be put in quotes to indicate that you are quoting someone and it's not our software or the GNOME project who is speaking. And I am almost done. Perfect. I would finally talk about what we do. What we do in the I89 team, and talk about Demlines, our localization platform. So we provide our own localization platform, which is Demlines. It allows us to coordinate translation in all our languages, and it also extracts the string from your software. So we just have to connect Demlines to your repository, and then we do the extraction of messages ourselves, and we coordinate the translation process ourselves. So why is it called Demlines? It's a reference to a sentence which is lies, Demlines, and statistics. It's a critique of applied statistics, because we are a statistic application. We track actually the translation completeness of our software. So I tried to compare the situation between GNOME and other desktop environment projects. And in terms of scale, we can compare GNOME to KDE, because we are both major projects with hundreds of modules and tens of thousands of strings to translate. We are organized very differently. KDE is still using SVN and a synchronization process to push PO files to the software, while we use Demlines to directly push commits of PO files directly to your repositories. So it's an automated process with Demlines. We have a tool, an offline tool, which is gTranslator, which is highly maintained. And in KDE, they have Localize, which is also a tool dedicated to translation in the ecosystem. Other projects benefit from centralized platform like Transifex or Weblate, but they are really small in comparison to KDE or GNOME. Our process deliberately prioritize consistency over convenience. Like every 6 months, the question rises again, why don't we provide an online translation platform? I'd say it's more a feature than a bug. Actually, we think that as we focus on consistency, we think that translating the PO files as a whole improves consistency, because you have the whole context of the application, and so when you are in doubt with a term, for example, you can just search in the PO file to just compare what is the term that has been used in previous translation. So our focus is consistency with this. We also have Demlines working on unifying the translation process. So the translation is really simple. You are a member of a team, you decide to translate, so you reserve a module for translation, you translate, you upload your PO file, it is being reviewed, then approved, then pushed to the repository. And it's what does Demlines. It's an application to coordinate the translation process. And finally, by having such an application on our ecosystem, we also lower maintenance and overhead and resources, because Demline is a very lightweight application, and it's a very critical application also, because without Demlines, we cannot localize software. So the trade-off is that translators have to install gTranslator, translate offline, but the benefit is quality, because we use translation memories, and the terminology is also discussed within the teams, within the translation teams, and we understand that it's a demanding workflow, but with our focus is on quality. Demlines, this is what you have on the right. It's the, what is it? Yeah, it's the summary of a module. You have the translation of GNOME Shell in French, for example. We track many branches because we have an organization which is based on module. Module is an application, so glib is a module, GNOME Shell is a module, or, well, you got it. We track branches. This allows us to maintain translations in previous versions of GNOME, for instance. For instance, I had to fix a string in GNOME 49, and I also fixed it in GNOME 50. And tracking different branches allows us to do this. We have also the domain. The two main domains you have are UI translations and documentation. GIMP is an exception because for GIMP you have PO install, you have installer, Windows installer, you have documentation, many kind of documentations. And the root and the core thing is the PO file, the file you actually translate as a translator. I recently added something in Demlines. It's the ability for maintainers to actually change the settings of their modules. We received a lot of questions or of requests to update like the URL of the project, to update the generation process of some modules, and so we decided just to open the ability to modify the properties of your module yourself on Demlines. So now you have a form to do it. And once your module has been approved, if you want to add your module on Demlines, you have to talk to us, opening an issue on GitLab, and we have a review process, and we will ensure that everything is correct. But once your project is accepted and added on Demlines, you have a full control of adding branches, removing branches, changing the PO generation strategy, etc. And finally, I would like to talk about string freeze breaks. So for upcoming or already released modules, we track string freezes. So as of July 2026, GNOME 50 is frozen, and GNOME 51 will be frozen at the end of mid-August. And we have an announcement period that starts at the beginning of August. It means that if you are a developer, we would like you not to update the strings of your software, because translators need to have time to translate. And if a string has been translated, we don't want translators to translate it over and over because you wanted to make some adjustments. From the 1st August of this year, you have to declare the breaks, and they have to be approved. It's not like it's not a punishment. It's just to ensure that we can help you with the strings, and also maybe try to find arrangements to maintain consistency. In any case, you should contact us on GitLab, Discourse, or Matrix, and we'll fix that together. So this is my conclusion, and I think I'm okay with the time. So as I said, internationalization is a form of accessibility. I want to insist on this. GNOME has a good support for about 80 languages, 80 locales with radically different writing systems. So text directions, grammatical rules and structures, highly inflected languages like Russian, for instance, or segmentation-free languages like Chinese. Demlines is our translation platform. We coordinate the internationalization and localization process. So if you need anything about internationalization and localization, please reach us. And if you want to join us, you're welcome. So thanks for listening. I'd like to thank Anders, Raphael, also Victoria from the Polish team, and Denis from the Russian team who helped me ensuring that what I said is correct. So if you have any questions and suggestions, please ask.
Hi there. This was super interesting. I love how you deep down into the implementation, but also the details about how to translate actually. I wonder, do you see any gaps in documenting all these? Like, is this, I'm having a look, for instance, at the writing guide in the Human Interface Guidelines, and I love it because super concise, super helpful in some ways in how you should be concise and that how that helps with internationalization. But I think, for instance, about all these cultural nuances or the inclusive language, you need reference material for that, right? You don't just do inclusive language. You need to know the actual instances of it, right? Do you see any gaps there? And basically that's my question.
Our first objective before this presentation was to update the documentation, then to actually present what I'm presenting right now, and at the end say, hey, we have all the guidelines written at the end of the presentation. And actually we as you see, we didn't have time to do this, but this is our plan for the next 6 months. It's to actually take the documentation that is living on the old GNOME wiki to convert it to, well, because this documentation can now live in multiple places, like the handbook, the developer guidelines, and the UI guidelines. So we have to take them as a whole and try to dispatch the correct things at the correct places, because the public is different every time. So we have this task on stage, and this is our goal for the next 6 months. We have a blog post which is actually almost ready to explain just that, but we missed time to do it. But this is planned for the next month, and yes, we have this big challenge, and we have also changes on Demlines that you might like on the next 6 months. But I won't say more. But just have a look at the backlog and and you'll see.
We are mostly out of time. Urgent questions? Guillaume, thank you.
Welcome.
We now have a short break.
Thank you very much.